Hello and welcome back. We're continuing with Chapter 20. Let's start to talk about a particular type of domestic violence, intimate partner violence. The vast majority of intimate partner violence is perpetrated by men, and it's either directed towards women or men on men violence. Around 1 in every 3 women and about 1 in every 4 men will report having experienced severe physical violence from an intimate partner in their lifetime. Homicides are typically committed by current or former intimate partners, and it is also the largest cause of death of pregnant women in the United States. Nearly 75% of all murder-suicides involve an intimate partner. With intimate partner abuse, people are typically caught in a cycle of violence. That violence will start out with building tensions, followed by some form of violent incident. Typically, following that, there is some kind of reconciliation and a calm period. But these cycles tend to repeat over and over again, with the abuser frequently thinking that this is not going to happen again in the future. Unfortunately, it almost always does recur. So what do you think causes domestic violence? Unfortunately, there is no single reason to explain why people tend to be abusive in relationships, and people tend to stay within abusive relationships even when they recognize the abuse. Often alcohol is associated with violence. Sometimes marital dissatisfaction is a predictor of domestic violence. Poor relationship skills, as well as poor ability to cope with mental and emotional challenges, particularly health challenges, can contribute to abuse and abusive behaviors. Unfortunately, generational cycles of violence do occur, and tolerance of abusive male behaviors is a definite problem. We all need to step up here and stop tolerating any form of abusive male behaviors. Unfortunately, children can get caught up in domestic abuse. Child maltreatment is defined as an act or series of acts that either through action or omission by a parent or a caregiver causes harm, or indeed the potential for harm or threat to harm. Example of a threat to harm will be leaving a child in a locked car in the heat. Child abuse refers to acts of commission. That means deliberate acts, where intentional words or actions are causing harm or threat to the child. Abuse can come in many forms. It can be sexual, it can be psychological, it can be physical, or it can be a combination of these. Frequently, it is a combination of these. Neglect, on the other hand, refers to acts of omission, and that is failure to provide for a child's basic needs for food, shelter, clothing, medical care, education, and proper supervision. By proper supervision, I mean safety. Child sex abuse. Sexual abuse for children by adults or by other children can include sexually suggestive conversations, inappropriate touching, inappropriate kissing, petting, or any other kinds of sexual interaction. Grooming or abuse of power is a common theme. Be aware that grooming and abuse of power can occur from people that might commonly be thought as safe protectors, but are not necessarily so. So be cautious with parents, with doctors, with teachers, with coaches. These people can abuse their power. 90% of child sex abuse victims know their perpetrator, and nearly 70% of children who are abused by family members, typically adult males. Always supervise your children. If we look at child abuse and neglect by age, here on this graph, you can see rates per 1,000 children, and then by age, you can see it declines with age. The neglect occurs often in their first year of life. That's a time when parents need particular support from friends and family. It's a very difficult time, a lot of changes occurring, but unfortunately, abuse and neglect do occur for all children, children of all ages, and you can see sadly here the numbers are around 10 per thousand, 10 cases per thousand children. That means about 1 in every 100 children is suffering from abuse or neglect. Elder abuse is another all too common problem. Many elders may feel embarrassed and may not have the cognitive ability to report abuse. Again, the abuse can be physical, it can be emotional, it can be sexual, it can be just abandonment, it could be financial abuse. People do take advantage of elders' diminished cognitive abilities occasionally to steal money from them or abuse them in other ways financially. And there is neglect that can occur for elderly people as well. So what are some strategies to prevent abuse? First of all, it is important to teach safe and healthy relationship skills, and also to be able to recognize when abuse is occurring and to get out of situations, abusive situations, and report abusive situations to the appropriate authorities. It's important to engage influential adults and peers to help prevent violence and abuse within our communities. It is important to disrupt pathways of partner violence and generational cycles of partner abuse, and to alter and treat as unacceptable patterns of male upon female or male upon male violence. It's important to create a protective environment for all people where there are resources available to people who are suffering from abuse. It's important to strengthen economic supports and social supports for families, particularly at times of change with new additions to families, and also at times of stress where health issues arise and things like that. And it is really important to support all of the survivors of violence and abuse in our society. Let's talk a little here about sexual victimization. This takes place in many forms. There is sexual assault and rape. There is acquaintance rape. That's when the rapist is known to the person who is suffering from that violence. Rape does occur on U.S. campuses. There is marital rape, child sex abuse, sexual harassment, stalking, and cyber stalking. A new problem. Well, cyber stalking is a new problem. Stalking is a problem in society. There are emotional and psychological abuse. There is there are social contributors here to sexual violence. Essentially, any situation where an individual is coerced or forced to comply with another's sexual overtures or acts is an example of sexual victimization and needs to be reported. Let's talk about sexual assault and rape. Sexual assault is an act in which one person is sexually intimate with another person without consent. Rape is defined as penetration without the victim's consent. And aggravated rape is any rape involving one or multiple attackers. That can be with strangers, that can involve weapons, can involve physical beating. Simple rape occurs when the rapist is known to the victim and typically does not involve physical abuse, physical beating or violence, or the use of a weapon. Unfortunately, acquaintance rape is on the rise. People should be aware of this. It's often termed date rape. It's an inappropriate term to use because that implies that there was some sort of consent involved, and acquaintance rape does not involve consent. Acquaintance rape refers to any rape in which the rapist is known to the victim. It can occur in dating situations, but it can also occur between strangers at a bar or in a social setting. Unfortunately, between 13 and 30% of undergraduate women report being victimized by non-consensual sexual acts involving force or incapacitation. And unfortunately, there are situations where drugs are being given to people when they're not aware of them, and then rape is occurring. Any incidents of this nature needs to be reported immediately. Even if you suspect something like this may have happened, please report it immediately. Within marriages, there is marital rape. Definitions do vary, but marital rape is essentially any unwanted sexual intercourse or penetration that is obtained by force or by threat, where the spouse is unable to consent or unwilling to consent. Marriage is certainly not a license to rape. Those cases need to be reported immediately. Sexual harassment. Sexual harassment can include many situations. Here are some common situations to be aware of. For example, submission to conduct as a condition of employment. Asking for sexual favors in response to employment, or for academic progress, or perhaps participation in some sort of program at the university or a team. Any situation in which rejection will influence a person's employment or academic standing, or grades, or ability to play in a team. Those are examples of sexual harassment. Sexual harassment will interfere with an employee's work, with the academic career, creates a hostile environment, and that is a very offensive environment. Any situation where you suspect sexual harassment should be reported to campus security or the police immediately, so it can be swiftly dealt with, and so other victims can be saved from sexual harassment. What are some ways to protect yourself when you recognize a situation is rising to the level of sexual harassment? First, tell the harasser to stop. Second, document the harassment, record it in some way. Try to make sure that you are never alone in the presence of the harasser. Definitely complain to a higher authority. I would say take that to the police or campus security immediately. And remember that you have done nothing wrong. This is an offense from the harasser. They are creating a hostile environment, and their actions need to be stopped. Let's take a look at a short video on sexual harassment in campuses. So you're going to be aware of some of the things that do occur.
At campus trial, 2 former college football players now facing decades in prison found guilty of sexually assaulting a female student in a dorm room at Vanderbilt University. And this evening, a new case, a star swimmer now charged at another school. ABC's Ryan Smith on the new focus on the culture of college campuses.
The defendant sat in stunned silence as the verdict was read.
We, the jury, find the defendant Corey Lamont Beatty guilty of aggravated rape.
Former Vanderbilt University football players Corey Beatty and Brandon Vandenberg,
Guilty of aggravated rape.
both found guilty of an on-campus sexual assault. The victim was in court every day. The jury, who had been shown cell phone video evidence of the rape, taking just 3 hours to find the men guilty, the prosecution argued Vandenberg, Beatty, and 2 other former football players brought the unconscious victim, who was casually seeing Vandenberg, to his room after a night of heavy drinking. saying while Beatty and another man sexually assaulted the woman, Vandenberg egged them on. She testified in court last week. Her voice is distorted here.
I remember waking up in an unfamiliar room.
The prosecution reading a statement on the victim's behalf.
I want to remind other victims of sexual violence, you are not alone. You are not to blame.
The topic, a painful national discussion. 95 campuses are under federal investigation for their handling of sexual assault complaints on campus. And just this week, a Stanford student charged for allegedly raping a woman on campus grounds. 2 students on bikes stopped the attack and police were called. The accused, star swimmer Brock Turner, has withdrawn from the university. Stanford banning the student from setting foot on campus again. Turner's attorney saying they had no comment tonight. Turner faces multiple felony counts and will be arraigned on Monday. As for the Vanderbilt case, Vandenberg and Beatty will be sentenced on March 6th and could face decades in prison.
There are social contributors to sexual violence. There is a culture of minimization where rape is one of the most underreported crimes. Oftentimes trivialization of rape. Many people are unaware how common rape is, particularly on college campuses. There is often blaming of the victim. There are still people who believe that how a person looks can lead to rape. This is wrong. And there is a pressure in social norms for men to behave aggressively in a predatory fashion towards women. Again, this is wrong. And these portrayals, sometimes in the media, sometimes in games, sometimes in movies, creates a hostile environment. Please all do your part to prevent violence, sexual violence. If you see sexual violence, step in and stop it immediately and report it to the appropriate authorities. Bullying is another form of violence that's all too common on campuses. It involves unwanted aggressive behaviors, typically with real or perceived power imbalances. The behaviors are designed to demean or degrade another human being. They can be verbally, they can be socially, physically, and more recently, cyberbullying takes place where people are abused on social media. Bullying behaviors do tend to carry over from childhood into college years. And college bullying can take the form of gossip or rumors, shaming people for supposed sexual exploits. These are forms of sexual bullying. These should not be tolerated on campus. You should again report any actions where you see this happening, because this sort of behavior is creating a hostile environment on campus. So, some strategies to avoid becoming the victim of violence. First of all, taking a self-defense course is a great way to take control. Do always try to speak with a strong voice, say no, maintain eye contact, remain alert at all times and be confident around others, and demand help from others if you feel in trouble, if you feel troubled by hostile behavior of somebody around you. Demand others around you, order them to help you in that circumstance. And ask them to call the police if you're feeling that a situation may escalate. Recognize ploys used by attackers. Sometimes an attacker will try to isolate a victim by asking for help or offering help, trying to get the victim in a situation where they are alone. You can also help to prevent these circumstances by never being alone with a person you suspect may be violent or sexual harasser. be careful when people claim authority when they do not have authority. And be aware that sometimes people will feign accidents and injuries to get help, and again isolate a victim. Other ways, be vigilant. Use campus escort services. Always walk well-lit routes. Try to vary your routes. And for example, you're going for a run, don't record from your house. Record from a block or two away from where you are actually living, so you cannot be easily identified by a GPS route saved to a public server. Do not leave the bar with a friendly stranger. Be aware that strangers can be dangerous. Always let friends and family know where you are, where you're going. Stay close with friends, and keep windows and doors locked. If a rape does occur, immediately call 911. It is important not to bathe or shower or clean up, because you can destroy evidence. Do not launder or throw away clothes. Again, you want to maintain evidence for the police. It is a good idea to contact the rape assistance hotline. If a friend is raped, believe them. First of all, you should believe them. Recognize that rape is a violent act and very stressful. Encourage the victim to see a doctor as soon as possible. Encourage the victim to report the crime, or indeed go to the CARES site for campus and report what you've learned yourself. Be understanding. Recognize that emotional recovery is a long and difficult process, and encourage the victim to seek counseling. There are some community strategies for preventing violence. Teaching self-defense is a good starting point. Teaching conflict resolution, coping skills, and communication skills, very helpful. Help individuals develop high self-esteem and high self-respect, so that people will not put up with abusive behaviors of any type. Enforce policies against discrimination or hatred of any kind. Provide family planning programs, family support programs. Increase efforts to identify and help victims of violence. Many times there will be people who are victims of violence who are remaining silent and need support. Improve treatment and support of all victims, and work towards treating both the psychological as well as the physical consequences of violence through counseling and other forms of support.